Hello friends, welcome to or back to my channel. My name's Haley and today we're going to be doing my October and November wrap up. So I did not film an October wrap up for whatever reason, so today we are going to be wrapping up October and November. We are in my classroom. It's in the late afternoon, so it's already kind of dark in here, but we're just gonna go for the low light cozy vibes because I don't want to put the overhead lights on. They're very abrasive. So that's what we're going for here. We're gonna talk about the 22 books that I read between October and November. In October, I read 14 books, and in November, I read 8, so not quite evenly spread amongst the months. I was feeling a little bit life slumpy in November, so that is why I did not read as much, and I did read every single book on audio, which there were some really good audios, but I definitely did not read as much, but that is okay. It is the end of the year and I'm ready to finish strong, finish my TBR for the end of the year, my 24 books to read in 2024, and finish my book of the month challenge. So let's talk about the books. So the first book that I read in October was Tales from the Cafe, and this is the second book in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. And each one of these books, you just follow 4 different stories of people who come to this cafe, and they come here because you can time travel forwards or backwards, and you can visit someone until your coffee gets cold. And so this one we followed 4 different stories, and I did not like these stories as much as I did the first book. However, I did really enjoy the development of the characters who work at the cafe. So while we are following these stories of these people, we are also following the people who work at the cafe and stuff that's going on in their lives. And so I did really enjoy hearing more about the people who worked from the cafe, and I am really looking forward to reading the next 3 books in the series and just continuing with these stories of these people who time travel before the coffee gets cold. The next book that I read is the sequel, and this book is the sequel to the book called The Plot. And this book, really, I cannot give a description because it would be super spoilery for the plot. But essentially what happens in the plot is the main character is I feel like I should remember his name. I can't though. What is his name? It's like his whole brand. Anyways, our main character, he's like an author, but he's not doing well. And so he's like teaching writing at this college. And he has this student, and this student is like, I don't need your input. I already know my plot is the best. Like, I'm going to write the best book. And then the student dies and never publishes his book. And so then he publishes it himself. And then somebody starts to come for him because they're like, you stole that. So that is the plot. And then the sequel directly follows that, and it follows like his wife that he gets in the first book. So that is all I will say. I did really enjoy this one. I liked the audio. I think that the twists were good. Some of them near the end I think got a little bit crazy, and I was like, that's not necessarily super realistic, but overall I did like this book. His name's Jacob Finch Bonner. That's his name. It just popped into my little brain. So yes, that is the sequel. Next, I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and I actually do have a whole dedicated reading vlog to this series, so I will not say too much here, especially since this video is already going to be kind of long. But essentially, The Pumpkin Spice Cafe is following our main character, Jeannie, and she moves to this little town called Dream Harbor to take over the Pumpkin Spice Cafe from her aunt, I believe, and she meets the local sexy farmer, as they say in the books, and there's kind of like a romance from there. And I'm just going to go ahead and pop this up here. I also read The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore and The Christmas Tree Farm this month by the same author. Each book follows a different set of characters, but you do meet the characters like in the other books. I overall do enjoy these books. They're advertised as romantic mysteries, so they are rom-coms, but they also each do have their own little mystery element that kind of brings the characters together. Overall, I did enjoy these books. I don't think they're the best books ever. I thought the smut was kind of icky. There was definitely some stuff that icked me out. Like, watch my full video to see all my little icks. Logan's grandmother was the best character. That's like the love interest, the sexy farmer from the first book. His grandmother was hilarious. But overall, I do think these are fun. If they sound interesting to you, I would definitely recommend them. They're really easy to read. They go by super quick. So it's a great book to just like pick up if you just want like a quick fun read. Then in October. I also read 4 of the Percy Jackson books. So I read The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, The Last Olympian, and The Chalice of the Gods. So I read books 3 through 6. And I'm not going to go into extensive details about those because, again, spoilers. And I also have a dedicated Percy Jackson reading vlog that I will be finishing up because I finally just finished the 7th book. So I will be finishing that up and getting that ready to come out to you guys soon. So all my thoughts will be there, but Percy Jackson has my heart. I love the series forever and ever. Percy Jackson was actually a clue on Jeopardy the other night. It was about like the chapter titles, and his first chapter is like, I vaporized my pre-algebra teacher or something like that, and I was like, I knew it. So yes, Percy Jackson reread has been successful. I have finally finished the 7th book, the new one. I started it in October and I just finished it in December, but that's okay. And so yes, those are 4 of my other books. And then the next book that I read was Some Like It Cold. And this book was interesting. I had a lot of feelings about it when I read it, and I've kind of forgotten some of those feelings. But essentially we're following our main girl, and I don't remember her name, and she is autistic, and that is a big part of the story, is her being autistic and her doing a lot of things to please other people and not doing stuff for herself because she doesn't know how to stand up for herself. So that is like a main part of the story. And basically she's been away at college and she comes home and for the holidays, and everyone's like so excited to see her, and she's like doing all this stuff for other people, but like really she's came home to tell her parents like, I'm done with college, and she knows that they're gonna like kick her out. So she's basically come home to say goodbye to her family, to leave again. And there's a lot going on, right? This is a romance, so there is that romantic element with this guy that was like her nemesis in high school. And there's some family aspects. Her sister's getting married. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this book. I think my biggest thing that held me back from enjoying this book more is there was just a lot going on. There was a lot going on, a lot of different subplots, and it just felt like nothing was really fully developed because there was all this other stuff. So instead of some like 1 or 2 things being like fully developed, we had 3 to 5 things that were kind of all underdeveloped. So that definitely took me out of the story some and like decreased my overall enjoyment. However, I don't think this is a bad book. I did like it. I did love the main character and like loved seeing her growth. So I would still recommend this if you are interested. The next book that I read was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I also have a reading vlog of me reading this book. The reading vlog does have spoilers, so if you have not read it yet, I would not recommend that vlog. But this book follows Feyre, and Feyre is hunting for her family, and she kills this wolf, and it ends up that this wolf is a fae, and so she gets taken by a fae, and then she goes to like the fae world, which is called Prythian, and then she gets into all of the drama there. I'm not gonna say much more because I didn't really know a lot going into the book, and I think like it's kind of better that way. This book was just okay for me, which I know is like kind of, I feel like scared saying this on the internet still, but it just was okay. I definitely like, I wasn't uninterested. I just wasn't like, yes, I love this. Like, it was fine. And I am reading the 2nd book right now. I started it. I've kind of taken a pause because I'm just not that interested. But anyways, if you want to see my full thoughts, again, I have a vlog. I will link it down below. You know how like some YouTubers are like, I'll link it up above and down below. I don't know how to do the up above thing, so we'll just stick with the down below. But anywho, the next book I read is A Song to Drown Rivers. And this book is advertised as a fantasy book, but I really don't see the fantasy part of this book for the most part. I'm like not really sure like what they're referring to as fantasy. So this book, we're following our main character. I can't remember her name. And okay, let me back up. This book is set in like China in like 1300s times, and we're following our main character, and she's very beautiful, and she gets recruited by the king to go infiltrate their opposing kingdom so that they can bring them down. And so you follow her as she goes to the first palace like of her homeland, and she gets trained so that she can fool them into thinking she's like a noble person, and then she goes into the other kingdom and all of that. And she has her own personal reasons for accepting this like mission and doing this. It's very dangerous. Obviously she could die if they find out that she's a traitor, and she has her own personal reasons why she wants to get like kind of revenge on this kingdom. And so that's what we follow. And again, I don't really think this book was fantastical. I mean, I don't know. It was fine. It was not great, but it wasn't like boring either. There was definitely some slow parts. I think it could have been a little shorter, and I didn't really like the ending. I thought the ending was like it made me kind of feel like all that and for what. That's all I will say on that one. I did enjoy it to an extent, but it just didn't feel worth it in the end. The next book that I read was The Do-Over by Len Painter, and I loved this book. I gave this book 5 stars. I have literally not heard that many people talk about this book, and everyone talks about Better Than the Movies. And that's not to say that Better Than the Movies isn't good. I don't know. I haven't read it. But this book was fire, okay? We follow our main girl. Her name is Emily. I remembered. Emily wakes up and she's determined to have the perfect Valentine's Day. And obviously her day goes to and then what happens is she wakes up and she has to do the same day over and over again. And so once she catches on, obviously, right, she's like, okay, well, maybe I need to change this and it'll go away. Or maybe I need to change this to make it the perfect day. And all the while, when she starts this book, she has this boyfriend, but he kind of sucks. And then there's this other guy who doesn't suck. And the other guy who doesn't suck, his name is Nick. And at first she just like does not like him. And they're like, you know, very frenemies type situation. And then obviously her and Nick get to know each other, and she's getting to know him over the course of the book, but he isn't really getting to know her because like she's living the same day over and over and she can remember everything, but he doesn't like remember anything. So there is that like weird element of like her feeling like she knows him and he's like, who are you kind of thing. I loved the relationship development. I loved this. It was very like mature for high school aged. I didn't feel like annoyed by the characters. It was so good. And then my favorite part was, not my favorite part, but something that really just, I remembered my brain is her and Nick are chemistry lab partners, and one of their interactions, he's like, okay, Bunsen burner. And that just cracked me up. Like, I thought that was hilarious because I'm a chemistry teacher and I just thought that was funny. So I highly recommend this book, and I genuinely can't wait to read other books by Len Painter that are beloved because this one was so great. And then the last book I read in October was Pumpkinheads, which is a graphic novel by Rainbow Rowell. I don't know how you say it. Rainbow Rowell. And this follows 2 kids who are seniors, and they are working their last night at the pumpkin patch. And this one character, the main guy character, he has had this crush on this girl all year. I think maybe even more than all year. And so him and his partner that work the same shack together go on this mission for her to like get to this girl and tell her his true feelings. And then so they're going all over the festival, and it's just like crazy fun time. And then obviously there is some romance, some heartwarming stuff. It was really cute. I really enjoyed it. The artwork was great. I highly recommend this one if you're looking for a fun little Halloween related graphic novel. So those are all the books I read in October. And then in November I read 8 books. And in November is when I kind of started to lock into my book of the month and 24 to read in 2024 challenges. So all of these books that I read actually were for one of the 2 purposes of me trying to like finish my 2024 reads. So the first book that I read was The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern. And this book follows Augusta. This one's easy. This book follows Augusta, and we're following 2 timelines. So we're following back in the 1920s when she was a teenager in Brooklyn. And we're following in the 80s when she is, no, that's not right. Yeah, in the 80s when she is like 80 and she's like moving to this retirement home in Florida. And so we're flipping back and forth, and how it kind of starts is like she goes to this retirement home and then she runs into like someone from that time in her life when she was a teenager in Brooklyn. And so then you're flipping back and forth, and like there's clearly been some sort of like falling out between the 2 of them. And so as you go, you're learning more and more of the story, and you're also seeing them in the present day and their interactions and stuff. And this book was very good. I mean, another aspect of this book is that Augusta's father is like the town pharmacist, and he she adores her father, and she looks up to him, and she's like wants to go to pharmacy school. But then while they're living there, her great aunt comes to live with them, and she is kind of into like apothecary witchcraft-esque stuff. Not witchcraft, that was not the right word, but she's like an apothecary, and so she's about the holistic stuff. And so then she's starting to, feel kind of torn between like her father and her aunt's ways, and she's very interested in both, and like her father and her aunt don't agree. And so there's a lot going on, but I do think that everything that was brought up in this book was done very well. I feel like everything was fleshed out. I didn't feel like some of the stuff was just extra. It was just like there to be there. The book was still like short enough to be quick, but not like too short where there was just like stuff missing. I really genuinely did love this book. I loved like the commentary about like females, getting to do things that they want to do. Just because they're a woman, they should be able to do everything, right? And I just like something about this, it just didn't give me that like 5-star feeling, but like it genuinely was such a good book. I would say it's like a 4.5. I really love this one, and I would recommend this one. The next book that I read was called Adelaide, and this is a debut book, and this is essentially a young adult, new adult coming of age let me back up. It's not a young adult coming of age story. It is about someone who is a young adult. She's like 21, 22 in this book. And so we're just kind of following her coming of age story as she lives her life and like makes a lot of mistakes and learns from her mistakes. And honestly, I have very mixed feelings about this book. Part of it is that some of the stuff that this character goes through were just extremely unrelatable to me. And so I just like had a hard time like envisioning it. And like, how sometimes where you're reading a book and you totally get it and you're like, oh, okay, like I understand like that. I understand why they did that. But like when some of the stuff that she was going through was so unrelatable to me, I was like, is that a rational response? Like it seems kind of weird to me, but like I've never been in that situation. So I'm not sure if that's something that I would, do that seems rational. And so I definitely thought this book was interesting. I just didn't necessarily love it. It was not my favorite like adult coming of age story, which I do really like enjoy that type of book. But this one was just not my favorite. It was just okay. I definitely think there's better ones out there. Then the next book that I read was Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. And this one was interesting. So this is about this boy named Pablo, and he works at a bodega in New York City. And then one night this girl comes in and he realizes that she's like a famous pop star. And then they end up going on like this little date thing, and then they're like secretly seeing each other. And so this book was kind of odd. So you're kind of like, you're following Pablo's perspective, and also that he's going through other things. Let me not like throw out there, like his brother is getting in trouble at school. He's like in debt. He wants to go to college, but he doesn't have the money. So there's a lot of other stuff going on. I thought that this book was just okay. Like there was nothing really bad about it, but like there was nothing that really like drew me in, if that makes sense. And I think that the way that the like relationship went between the two was just it was just an interesting choice. And again, like Leanna, like the main lady, she was very famous. Like, right, I don't really know how famous people feel and stuff. I thought she was kind of a brat, but like maybe that's just what happens when you're famous. I don't know, So this one was okay, but honestly, in my opinion, you could skip it. The next book that I read was The Charm Offensive, and I also gave this book 5 stars. I really loved this one, and I was not expecting to, because recently I read The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, and in my mind it was like a similar thing where you had a contestant on a dating show. The main character is like on a dating show, and they're like the one that everyone's dating, but then you know that they're gonna have a romance with somebody who's not on the show, like not one of the contestants. And I kind of thought that I wasn't going to like it because I didn't really like the way they did it in The True Love Experiment. But this one was extremely different because our main character, who was like on the show, he didn't really know that he was gay. And so it wasn't like intentionally doing the show without like knowing that he was going to be with somebody else that wasn't on the show. Like he didn't sign up for this show going, oh, I'm gay, I'm going to date my producer kind of thing. Like he didn't really know. And so I definitely think that aspect of it was what bothered me. Like in the other book was like she knew she wanted to be with the producer, but she still went on the show anyways. So I think that's like what bothered me. But anyway, so this book we're following Charlie is the guy in the show. I can't remember the producer's name because why would I remember his name? But Charlie comes on the show. He is like a little San Francisco tech boy, and he's kind of had his fall from grace, and he wants to get back into working. And so he goes on the show to like redeem his personality and show everyone that he's normal and like he can do normal things. And you find out that his like fall from grace was like mental health related. which is like kind of because people were like treating him poorly because like he's different. And that's like a big part of this book is like Charlie coming to accept himself, and like it's okay that he is not like everyone else and he's neurodivergent. Like, why does my nose itch so bad? And like, so that's like a main part of this book, and I think that's part of what makes this book so special is like our producer and his name was Dave, came back to me, Dave and Charlie, and like, so Dave is the producer, so Dave is like so good with Charlie and he treats him so well, and it's like the first time that like Charlie has ever been like truly cared for, and it just builds up like this sweet connection, like friendship before they turn into like real feelings. And I think that is part of what made this book so special. I really like cannot put into words like what made this book so special and like why I loved it so much, but it was just so sweet and so genuine, and I just really loved the characters, and I genuinely like could feel the sparks, feel the love, like feel the genuine care they had for each other. And so that made me love this book, and I highly recommend it, and I can't wait to read her other book, her Christmas book. All right, we have 4 more books. Okay, so the next one is Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. And this is actually a nonfiction book, and I don't rate nonfiction because, I don't know, I just don't feel necessary. And this book was very interesting. So the premise of this book is essentially that women and men do not share an equal division of labor within the home. And because of that, there is a lot of resentment and stuff like that. And so she has created this system, the Fair Play, and it's a game to help the division of labor and to help things run more smoothly in the home and to like make everything easier. So this book is specifically geared towards women in relationships, long-term relationships, like essentially when you live with the person, and also moms. So like for me, this book, like a lot of parts of this book were not applicable because I'm not a parent. I don't have children that I'm responsible for. So this is definitely like you need to know like the appropriate audience before you go into this book. Like if you're like a single person, like this book is really irrelevant to you at this point in your life. I feel like you wouldn't enjoy it as much. So again, like before you go into this book, like know who the target audience is. But essentially what this woman talks about is how a lot of things happen in a marriage, and a lot of times women kind of lose themselves in marriage and in motherhood, and the resentment builds, and because of that, conflict starts to happen between husband and wife, and it ultimately drives couples apart. And so like this is her solution to that problem. And so how one, like men can take more responsibility for actions in the house, and two, like women can still feel like they have time for themselves is like essentially what's going on. And so her whole thing is like you take these tasks, and that everybody, like if you're responsible for a task, you're responsible for like the entire task. So if your task is like grocery shopping, you come up with a list, you check what you have at home, you figure out how much you need, you go to the store, you put everything away. Where instead of like, for example, like the mom writing the list and then the dad going to the store and picking it up. And so it's about like taking ownership for this tasks, and also like helping your partner see all of like the invisible work that goes into a lot of tasks, because that was like another thing is like where like women will do so much stuff and men don't really realize how much work is going into the maintenance of the home and the family. And so her thing is like if you split these tasks and people take full ownership of this tasks, everyone will feel more satisfied, and you will feel less like irritation and kind of things like that, and you'll work better as a team. So I definitely thought that was like an interesting concept. I think it definitely has like useful pieces of information. I definitely could see me and my boyfriend exploring some of this stuff, not necessarily to the fullest extent. I did think it was interesting. I don't think this is going to work for everybody. I don't think that this is necessarily like a foolproof method. But I do think it has some value, especially if you are feeling like you're the person, the mom who I just kind of like described. And I mean, also another thing that was interesting about this book. Well, there's two things that were interesting about this book to me. One is I am kind of like the man in this situation. So like basically this mom is like, I do everything. I cook, I clean, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm very much like not the default person that cleans my house, that does the cooking, that does the stuff like that. My boyfriend takes care of a lot of those things. And so it was definitely interesting, like from the woman's perspective, being like, oh, I'm the default, I do everything. Whereas like I'm the woman and I do not do everything. And so that was definitely interesting. And then the other interesting thing that was just like a part of this book was how, what was interesting to me is about how there's a lot of times like when couples get divorced, it is like the man will be saying, well, you're just not the person I married anymore. But like what got them to that point a lot of times is the woman like not like having kids and then staying home with the kids, right? And so then her whole life changes, right? So the man is like, oh, I want you to stay home with the kids. And then she becomes a mom. She, you know, like that's her whole life. And like she loses herself in those like that life, like the mom, and like being a mom is like her whole identity. And then like she does like change as a person because like basically like her identity, oh my God, my nose is just so bad. Her identity is changing. And then like, and it's what the husband wanted, but then like he doesn't want it at the same time. And that's like a common source of like divorce. And I thought that was interesting. And I don't know how true that is. It wasn't necessarily data-based. So I'm not necessarily saying this is like accurate and this happens to everyone. I just thought it was an interesting, an interesting approach to the topic and just like an interesting thought process. And I've been really thinking about that a lot. So that is fair play. I yapped about that book for a long time. We have a couple more. So next we have Marlena by Julie Buntin. And this book was interesting. This was like another coming of age story. And in this book, we're actually following the perspective not of Marlena. We're following the perspective of Kat. The girl's name is Kat, I think. Yeah, and so Kat is from this family, and her parents are getting divorced, and they don't really have any money, and so her and her mom and her brother moved to this, like, tiny little town, and they moved to this, like, tiny little decrepit house in, like, the middle of nowhere in Michigan. And Marlena is her neighbor. And Kat, like, kind of is at a point where she's, like, 15 or so. She, like, wants to reinvent herself. And so she kind of gets, like, swept into Marlena's world. And it's all about the effects that Marlena has on Kat and her relationships. And Marlena is not a good person, for lack of, like, a better thing. Like, she's not a great person. And pretty early on in the book, you find out that she dies. And, like, that's part of this book is, like, our main character, like, 15 years later is, like, still struggling with the grief of, like, this loss and just, like, the impact that Marlena had on her and how she changed her life and, like, it's affected her all the way into adulthood. And, again, like, I had a hard time relating to this book because there's a lot of things in this book that a lot of choices that the characters made that I would never choose for myself and I don't personally understand. But I do think it was told well. I think it is, like, realistic how easily you can get, like, pulled into someone's orbit like that when you want that attention and you don't feel like anyone cares about you. So I do think it was definitely, like, realistic in that aspect. It was crazy. This does have trigger warning for, like, SA and drugs and drug use and stuff like that. So lots of talks of more grown-up topics, even though, like, the book is about children, but it's more so, like, it's like the main character, like, reflecting on what happened and, like, telling you what happened in the past. So she's an adult now, but, like, these things did happen when they were children. So that was Marlena. And then the next book that I read was The Helsinki Affair, which this is a spy novel, and I've never read any, like, spy thriller type books before. And so this book was interesting. This book we're following our main character. I literally just read this freaking book. What is it? What was her name? I can't remember. Let me look. I want to say it's Anna, but I don't think that's right. Oh, Anna's the author. Definitely not the main character. Amanda. Okay, it was kind of close to Anna. So Amanda is this, like, person, and she works for the CIA, and she's, like, in their Rome office, and she's at work, like, just doing her little desk job. And this man shows up and nobody else is there. And he's like, listen, someone's going to kill this senator tomorrow. This is what they're going to do. And this is how it's going to look. And her boss comes back and she's like, listen, like, this man's telling us about this threat, this Russian man. And her boss is like, no, that's not going to happen. And then it does happen. And so then we follow the rest of the book with her kind of like taking on this Russian man, getting his intelligence, and kind of trying to figure out what the heck's going on and why did they want the senator killed. And then you find out that he was doing some like shady stuff that like nobody knew about, and so then they're looking into all of that. And another aspect of this book is Amanda's father also works for the CIA, and his past is tied up in what was going on with the senator. And so you're kind of following different characters. It's like a third person point of view, and so you kind of switch around and you get some stuff from Amanda's perspective, some stuff from her dad's perspective, some stuff from like other people's perspectives that she works with. This book was good. I think there was a lot going on. There was a lot of characters. And then honestly, I was a little bit intoxicated when I listened to the ending. So I don't necessarily have like the clearest opinion of the ending. I do know what happened. But I do think this was good. I would definitely read like another spy book. I'd maybe not one with like a bunch of Russian names, because they honestly all just kind of sounded the same to me. And I was mixing up the characters in my head, which I know that has a me problem. But they just like sounded like the same word over and over. So yeah, but I mean, I did enjoy it, and I would recommend it. I think it was a good book. I just probably should have paid a little more attention. And then the last book that I read was Dark Corners by Megan Golden, and this is the second book in the Rachel Crowell series. So the first book is called The Night Swim, and Rachel is a podcaster, and she's doing this. She's like a true crime oh my goodness, she does true crime podcasts, and she's making this in the first book, she's making a podcast about this rape trial that's going on in this like small beach town, while also investigating this old case of like a murder. Like it was like suicide, but ruled suicide, but the person who died, oh my god. First of all, my nose itch is so bad. It's so red. Second of all, I cannot say words. Okay, I'm gonna do this. She's reporting on the rape trial while also looking into this old case where it was ruled that the girl died by suicide, but her sister thinks it was a murder, and so they're reinvestigating this old cold case. Okay, that's the first book. The second book picks up genuinely like right after that happens, and she gets like called down to Florida by these FBI agents, and they're like, we need you for this case, blah blah blah. And then she gets there, and it's like about this guy who's in prison, and Rachel has no idea who it is. And they're like, oh, well, we think he's a murderer. He gets out of prison in 2 days, and they're saying that he's talking about you. They want you. And there's a lot more to it, but that is like the main gist. And so we're trying to figure out why this guy's in prison, or like, is this guy imprisoned wrongly? Did he do what other people think he did? What happened to this other girl? There's a lot going on. And I did like this one. I don't think it was as well crafted as the first book. I think the first book, like the plot and like the connections between the characters was a little more intricate and a little bit better done than in this book. But I did like it. I do think liked the way that everything ended up connecting. It was just a lot. And this one was also different because really, like, in The Night Swim, everything had already happened, right? They're following the trial. Like, that's, like, the live action thing. Whereas in this book, like, the live action is in, like, investigating and trying to figure something out. And, like, Rachel is, like, a part of this, like, crimes that are happening. Like, and so it's a very different vibe. Like, there's a lot more, like, action in this book. But also, like, I kind of liked, like, the way the first book was written better than this one. So it wasn't a bad book. I would still give it like 4 stars. I just think that The Night Swim is better, and I just liked the way that The Night Swim was told better. So those are all of the books I read in October and November. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. Let me know some of your favorite books from October and November, or if you've read any of these and what you think. Like, subscribe. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Love you.